Europe years ago did a top 100 list of things that people want to do before they die in England. And do you know what was number one? Swimming with dolphins.
Where they have the opportunity to take photos with our dolphins, kisses, handshakes, hugs, and they get a ride from our dolphins.
I think it's an extremely foolish thing to allow people to do. I don't think it's safe for the animals. I don't think it's safe for the people. A lot of people have been injured in Swim with the Dolphin programs. A lot more than you think.
People really don't think that visiting aquarium with dolphins pose any kind of danger, because it is the perception is that this is a completely safe environment, which is probably not.
Dolphins defecate and urinate 3 times more, a regular dolphin, 3 times more than the average human being every day. So this dolphin's living in its own fecal material, in its own urine. And if you don't do something about that, then with chemicals or with ozone or some type of mitigation, then basically you get a fettered pit. The water goes bad. So they're constantly adding chemicals to the water, chlorine, caustic soda, all types of algicides and polymers and copper sulfate to make it blue. But they're constantly fighting the fact that these dolphins are crapping and peeing in the pool in large amounts every day.
And we know that most of the fecal material, it is actually microbial biomass, germs, which are dissipated in this water. Defecation by a dolphin, there is about, I don't know, the numbers could be, trillions and trillions of bacteria are released, self-cleaning properties of natural ecosystems, right? But in the enclosed facility, what you can do, you can just pour maybe chlorine into that water or try to filter it, but how it is efficient or not efficient against disease-causing bacteria, it is not clear.
If you're there during the days of the high concentration, you are at risk of getting dysentery, of getting skin infections that are going to turn into a flesh-eating bacterial infection. There's any number of things that you're buying when you buy a ticket to these places that put dolphins and whales and sea lions on public display.
Water quality can be an issue because what happens is that the load of the animals and the technology of changing, it's like the ranges can be very extreme, right? So ozone, chlorine, UV, there's all different parameters. So some trainers I've known have developed like chlorine rashes.
There is no way to immediately fix some of these high coliform counts that can be generated, sometimes generated by the dolphins themselves, sometimes generated by the hot water that we suffer through in the summer times when it gets above 90 degrees down here. It's a petri dish.
It's not possible to swim without swallowing some water, right? Some of the bacteria will be coming really into your gastrointestinal tract. And second, it is, of course, you are not protecting your skin as well, right? This purification system, good question. Is it working in a way that it immediately filtered the bacteria? I don't think so. Maybe some bacteria even not trapped by the filters, so they are actually circulating in that system and probably become like endogenous population of this aquarium, and maybe even without defecation it may cause some problems for the visitors.
The Miami Aquarium, any of these facilities that have closed circuits, filter systems, given amount of water in the tank and it's recirculated through the filters, and then the filters are backwashed, and that lowers the water level, and they add fresh water to it out of Biscayne Bay, clean water, just a constant recycle.
The water quality conditions, whether it's a natural lagoon or an artificial environment, are replete with bacteria, viruses, and infectious materials that if an animal was compromised because of a wound or compromised because of poor health or immune deficiency, you are basically going to end up with an animal that needs a lot of medical attention, and it can ultimately die just from the water quality conditions. Medical reports, necropsy reports, and marine mammal inventory reports that you can find with the National Marine Fisheries Service that show you that animals have died from bacterial infections. And those bacterial infections come from the poor water quality that always exists.
What is actually happening in these systems? If there are so big bacterial load that it may pose the danger for visitors, if there are some bacteria which are, say, coming from humans and can infect the animals. In some studies it has been shown that, for example, so-called Staphylococcus aureus, methicillin-resistant Staphylococcus aureus, which is abbreviated MRSA, is extremely dangerous because it can be transferred among animals, can be transferred from animals to humans, from humans to animals, and vice versa.
Any infectious diseases that whales and dolphins in captivity may have that could be transferred to a trainer or to other animals. The diseases that they get are due to the stresses. They get pneumonia a lot from just poor circulation, poor cardiovascular operations. All of that just slows down in captivity. And so sometimes they get, just common everyday diseases that usually their immune system is able to defeat, but because they are under such stresses, their immune system just can't keep up sometimes with the stresses. They get ulcers, they get tooth infections, skin infections. They get a lot of different kinds of infections.
I came to work, with a common cold and sneezing and coughing, and next thing I know, we've got a dolphin or two that's doing sneezing and coughing respiratory ailments that they have to be put on antibiotics. That has happened.
Dolphins are highly intelligent animals. When they are in the captivity, I think they are subjected to the higher level of stress probably than any other animal, because the highly developed brain and nervous system, I suppose they are subjected to the higher level of stress. As we know, the stress affects the immune system, it suppresses the immune system, and the bacterial load also changes, and how it changes, it's also not clear.
And so when you are, for example, swimming with these animals, you'd better hope they're healthy and that you're healthy, because otherwise there could be problems. And certainly trainers have had problems. And I believe that a few of the animals that have died in the past have died because they've been exposed to something from people. Whether it was a member of the public or a trainer. More likely a trainer. Because the public, generally speaking, doesn't interact closely enough and often enough and for a long enough time with the animals to be a real hazard, whereas trainers, of course, are there every day.
Diseases that dolphins get, we can also get. Diseases that we get, we can transfer to dolphins, and vice versa. There's any number of combinations that are possible.
Diseases that can jump the species barrier. All right, so tuberculosis, for example. We can give tuberculosis to marine mammals. Brucellosis. Brucellosis is a disease of cattle, for example. It can jump to cetaceans, and then it can jump from cetaceans to humans. So there's several viruses and bacteria that can jump from cetaceans to people and people to cetaceans.
Fungal infections, which probably also can be, and if there is a slight bruise, for example, on a dolphin, it can be also easily infected with some sort of fungal infections like Candida or Aspergillus, this type of microbes.
Because I was in the fish house with fish blood and in and out of salt water with fish blood and feeding the dolphins, I got such a bad infection that they thought that I had leukemia, and ultimately had to have a lymph node in my left inguinal lymph node removed as a result of that. my past, not only have I witnessed some accidents, I've been the victim of some. I've had broken ribs. I have a finger here that looks very abnormal because of the infection from a sea lion. I've seen people rammed. I've seen people bitten and rake marks that just shredded their forearms. There's any number of situations that don't always happen in the wild because the animals get a chance to choose whether they want to stay or go, and you won't get hurt. If you impose yourself on these animals, you can get hurt. Just like you do enough with a dog that doesn't want your attention, you're going to get bit. You do enough to chase or try to go out and touch a marine mammal who doesn't want to be touched, and they will turn on you.
Usually the effects of captivity are to make a whale go quite crazy. Look what happened with Tilikum. He has killed 3 people, and apparently he went crazy from the effects of being in captivity, because they don't do that in the wild.
At different varying degrees, you get some animals. I've seen panic attacks in whales, and it's just like watching a panic attack in a human. It's not nice.
The psychological effects of living in captivity causes all sorts of stresses. The stress of sheer boredom, for one thing, of having nothing around. That would be like us living in a plain white room with no windows and no pictures on the wall and no other company.
Some animals that develop neurotic characteristics. They rub themselves, they bang their heads against the wall, they chew things.
The effects of the stress of captivity, the stress of the show schedule, the stress of eating dead fish. You know, it's not the diet these animals are used to having.
Because it's the same thing over and over and over every day, the same blaring music and the same clapping trainers and the same routines.
There's any number of experiences that would certainly qualify as aberrant behavior that, in my opinion, is caused by the stress of captivity. We give depressants to the petting pool dolphins because that environment of being stuck with people grabbing at you created dolphins that were very aggressive and were turned into biters. And those animals were given depressants on a regular basis to control their behavior. Some animals become aggressive, especially the males, because of their captive situation.
A lot of people have been injured in Swim with the Dolphin programs. A lot more than you think. There's several reasons why often it's not reported. One is most people who get attacked by a dolphin in a Swim with the Dolphin program are made to believe it was their fault. And because they are led to believe that dolphins are somehow magical, happy creatures that would never hurt a fly, they believe it. They actually feel that they must have done something wrong to make that dolphin bite them or make that dolphin ram them. And so they don't report it because they feel guilty. Right? So that's one reason why they don't report it. The other reason is because the facility itself often encourages them not to report it. And I believe in a couple of cases they've actually bought people off, not to settled, gave them some money so that they wouldn't report it. But the fact is that people are injured in Swim with the Dolphin programs a lot more than you think. It's usually minor. I'm not saying they're like mauled or anything, but they're bruised, they're fractured or broken bones, they're bitten, they have to get stitches, maybe 5 stitches, maybe 100 stitches. It happens a lot more often than you think.
Safety is guaranteed by the hush money that is given to pay for whatever injury and whatever money is made to make sure those people don't go out and sue. And if they do sue, in many cases, it's an out-of-court settlement, so nobody can talk about it. There's a gag order that's put at the end of any serious injury. I do know that when it comes to the several people who've been injured at SeaWorld, they many times have settled out of court and been given an extensive amount of money in exchange for not talking about the details of their injury and how this happened, and certainly not having any further conversation about being injured. So there's all kinds of ways you can find yourself in a hospital as a result of buying a ticket to see these poor animals as slaves.
Europe years ago did a top 100 list of things that people want to do before they die in England. And do you know what was number one? Swimming with dolphins.
Where they have the opportunity to take photos with our dolphins, kisses, handshakes.
I released self-cleaning properties of natural ecosystems, right? But in the enclosed facility, what you can do, you can just pour maybe chlorine into that water or try to filter it, but how it is efficient or not efficient against disease-causing bacteria, it is not clear.
If you're there during...
Dolphins defecate and urinate 3 times more, a regular dolphin, 3 times more than the average human being every day. So this dolphin's living in its own fecal material, its own urine. And if you don't do something about that, then with chemicals or with ozone or some type of mitigation, then basically you get a fettered pit. The water goes bad. So they're constantly adding chemicals to the water, chlorine, caustic soda, all types of algicides and polymers and copper sulfate to make it blue. But they're constantly fighting the fact that these dolphins are crapping and peeing in the pool in large amounts every day.
And we know that most of the fecal material, it is actually microbial biomass, germs, which are dissipated in this water. Defecation by a dolphin, there is about, I don't know, the numbers could be, trillions and trillions of bacteria.
Hugs, they get a ride from our dolphins.
I think it's an extremely foolish thing to allow people to do. I don't think it's safe for the animals. I don't think it's safe for the people. A lot of people have been injured in some of the dolphin programs. A lot more than you think.
People really don't think that visiting aquarium with dolphins pose any kind of danger, because it is the perception is that this is a completely safe environment, which is probably not.